What do the combined national defense budgets of every non-U.S. NATO country have in common with exactly four tech companies?
The price tag.
The price tag, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the projections for 2026, you've got Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft gearing up to spend roughly $650 billion on capital expenditures.
And they aren't buying tanks or submarines or fighter jets.
Right, no. They are buying concrete, silicon, and electricity. Lots and lots of electricity. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are pulling from a massive stack of intelligence. We've got market forecasts, grid reliability reports, corporate earnings calls, and even recent presidential executive orders. And when you lay all this information out at a table, it points to one staggering bottleneck threatening the entire artificial intelligence revolution.
Which we're calling the electron curtain.
The electron curtain,
Yeah.
exactly. It is this rapidly widening gap between AI's insatiable hunger for power and our physical electric grid's ability to, actually supply it.
It's a massive physical constraint on what is essentially a digital technology. So our mission today is to unpack how this unprecedented demand for energy is entirely rewriting the global economy.
Right.
We're going to explore how tech giants are suddenly being forced to become private utility companies just to keep their servers running.
Which is wild.
It really is. And we'll look at how this energy scramble is shifting the geopolitical balance of power between the U.S. and China. But most importantly, we're going to break down how this directly changes how you, the listener, pay for AI.
Because the ripple effects of this energy crunch are making a direct beeline for your utility bills
Yeah.
and your software subscriptions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack this $650 billion burn. Wall Street is calling it the CapEx war. And the numbers coming out of these early 2026 earnings reports are, they're just hard to wrap your head around.
It's an astronomical amount of money. Amazon alone is projecting something like $200 billion in capital expenditures for the year, right?
Yeah, $200 billion.
And Alphabet is looking at up to $185 billion. Meta and Microsoft are pacing right alongside them. Combined, you are looking at over $630 billion in a single year.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that is a 60% jump from what they spent in 2025.
A 60% jump in 1 year for the biggest companies on Earth.
Yeah.
So what exactly does $630 billion buy you? Because they aren't just, hiring more software engineers to sit on beanbags and write code.
Not at all. This is heavy industry. They're buying vast tracts of land, incredibly specialized networking equipment, and literal mountains of GPUs.
Right.
But the hidden cost, the really expensive part, is the massive physical infrastructure required to support those chips. Legacy server racks, the kind that ran the internet for the last decade, they used to draw about 5 to 10 kilowatts of power.
Okay.
Today's AI racks are topping 100 kilowatts.
That's a huge jump.
It is. You can't just plug that into a standard wall socket and point a Deska fan at it. It requires an entirely new level of electrical distribution and cooling.
I was actually reading about some of the cooling tech they're deploying, and it sounds like science fiction. They're actually submerging the servers in liquid.
Immersion cooling, yeah.
Yeah.
They are literally dunking entire server racks into specialized engineered fluids.
That sounds crazy.
It sounds wild, but it's incredibly efficient. It can cut cooling energy use by up to 40%. But building industrial scale facilities equipped with that kind of plumbing and power distribution at a global scale, that's what's driving this historic spending spree.
And from what I understand, this spending spree is actually terrifying Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a projection regarding Amazon and Meta's free cash flow, and it honestly looks like a typo.
I know exactly the one you mean.
Yeah. Amazon is potentially facing negative free cash flow to the tune of $17 billion to $28 billion. And Meta's free cash flow might plummet by 90%.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't spend their day looking at balance sheets, why does that make investors lose sleep?
Well, think of free cash flow as a company's safety net. It's the money left over after they've paid all their operating expenses and capital expenditures.
Their runway.
Exactly. It's the cash they use to pay dividends, buy back stock, or weather an unexpected economic storm. When that number drops by 90% or goes negative entirely, it means the company is burning through cash faster than their incredibly profitable core businesses can bring it in.
They are essentially emptying the vault to build these data centers.
Yes.
Which begs the question, why? Why are these tech leaders willing to burn through so much cash and spook the very investors they usually try to appease?
Because they view this as a battle for survival. It's a classic arms race, just fought with silicon instead of gunpowder. Tech leaders like Google's Sundar Pichai have openly stated that their biggest fear isn't overspending.
It's underinvesting, right?
Exactly. It's a compute capacity shortage. The logic here is ruthless. The potential future revenue of the AI era is measured in the trillions of dollars.
Billions with a T.
Right. If you underinvest today and you don't have the physical infrastructure to run the next generation models, you don't just lose a little market share, you lose the entire era.
So they view this $650 billion as the bare minimum table stakes required just to stay in the game.
Precisely.
So they are building these massive liquid-cooled factories just to make sure they have enough juice. But let's bring this down to the listener's level.
Sure.
Why does AI need all this electricity in the first place? When we hear about AI, the media usually focuses on the training phase, like feeding the model the entire internet so it learns how to speak.
And training does take a massive amount of energy up front. Think of training like building a highly complex factory. But the data shows a massive shift under the radar towards something called inference.
Inference.
Yeah. Inference now accounts for 70 to 90% of AI's total energy life cycle.
And inference is just the act of you or me actually using the AI, right? Asking a chatbot a question or having it draft an email.
Exactly. Inference is running that factory every single day, millions of times a second for every user on Earth. And the micro-level math on this is fascinating.
Break it down for us.
A standard text query, like doing a basic web search or asking a chatbot a simple question, costs about 0.3 watt-hours of electricity.
Which doesn't sound like much.
It isn't in isolation. But when you move from basic text to advanced reasoning models or models that generate images and high-definition video, the energy consumption absolutely skyrockets.
How much are we talking?
High-end AI video generation can consume 1,000 to 3,000 times more energy than that basic text prompt.
3,000 times more energy just to generate a 5-second clip of a cat riding a skateboard.
Yes. Because it is a highly memory-bound process, the energy isn't just used in the calculation itself. A huge amount of power is burned constantly moving massive, heavy datasets back and forth between the memory chips and the processing units.
And here is where this global infrastructure problem lands right in your lap. Because this inference phase is so wildly expensive, the business models we've gotten used to have to change.
They do.
If you look at the industry projections for 2026, the era of the all-you-can-eat $20 a month AI subscription is effectively over.
The math simply doesn't support a flat fee anymore. The industry is rapidly being forced into metered usage and pay-per compute models.
It reminds me of the early days of cell phones, where you had to buy a bucket of minutes and you were constantly stressed about going over your limit.
It's exactly like that.
Instead of unlimited access, you're going to be paying microtransactions based entirely on how complex your query is. Asking the AI to quickly proofread an email might cost fractions of a cent, but asking that same AI to deep reason through a massive spreadsheet or render a video presentation is going to cost significantly more.
Your bill will directly reflect the electricity required to answer you.
Which raises an even bigger logistical nightmare. Where is all this electricity actually coming from?
Right. If we zoom out to the macro level, the U.S. currently hosts about 44% of the world's data center capacity. But our power grid was simply not built for this kind of load. Morgan Stanley has projected a U.S. power shortfall of 44 gigawatts through 2028.
44 gigawatts. I always struggle to visualize gigawatts.
Think of it this way. 1 gigawatt is roughly enough to power a medium-sized city, or about 750,000 homes.
Okay.
So a 44 gigawatt shortfall means we are quite literally running out of spare electricity on a national scale.
That's terrifying.
It is. The safety margin of the U.S. grid, the spare capacity kept in reserve for heat waves or emergencies, has dropped from 26% 5 years ago down to 19% today, and it's heading dangerously close to the 15% threshold.
And 15% is bad.
Grid operators consider 15% the red line for rolling blackouts.
Wow. And we don't have to wait until 2028 to see the real-world consequences of that tightening. It's happening right now in places like Virginia, which is effectively the data center capital of the world.
Oh, absolutely.
I was looking at the late 2025 capacity auction for the PJM grid, which serves Virginia and a dozen other states, and the prices just exploded.
They went from about $29 per megawatt day to over $333.
An 11-fold increase.
Yes. The total auction cost hit $16.4 billion, and the independent market monitor explicitly found that massive data center demand accounted for 40% of that spike.
When wholesale electricity prices jump 11 times over, somebody has to pay for it. And that somebody is the local resident.
Exactly.
People in places like Baltimore saw their monthly residential bills jump by $17 almost overnight. When people's air conditioning bills spiked because a tech company built a server farm down the road, politicians tend to notice.
They definitely notice.
There were over 300 bills filed in state legislatures in just the first 6 weeks of 2026, aiming to heavily regulate data center power use.
The political pressure to protect everyday citizens from carrying the financial burden of the AI boom really reached a boiling point. And that brings us to the White House intervention. In March 2026, the Trump administration introduced what they called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge.
And what did that actually require the tech companies to do?
It was a direct response to those spiking utility bills. The administration got the 7 biggest tech firms to sign a commitment that fundamentally changes how they operate.
Okay.
The pledge requires these hyperscalers to build, bring, or buy their own dedicated power for any new AI data centers.
So they can't just plug into the public grid anymore.
No, they can no longer just drain the local supply. They essentially have to self-fund their own power generation so that residential grid prices are shielded.
Which is a massive shift.
It is. It's also worth noting that Anthropic, one of the major AI labs, actually set the template for this a month prior when they publicly promised to absorb any consumer electricity price increases caused by their own facilities.
So the regulatory reality is that big tech is reacting by literally becoming the power company.
Yeah.
The market analysis we're looking at maps out this massive 56-gigawatt shadow grid that is currently being built entirely behind the meter.
Bypassing the public utilities completely.
Completely. I saw the specs for a new meta campus in El Paso, Texas. They aren't just tapping into the Texas grid. They are building a 366-megawatt plant right on site using 813 modular natural gas generators.
And that's just one site. Crusoe Energy is building a 2.7 gigawatt campus in Wyoming.
Going back to our scale from earlier, 2.7 gigawatts is enough to power over 2 million homes.
Exactly. That single tech campus will produce triple the power demand of the entire state of Wyoming.
That is staggering.
They are using advanced gas turbines and fuel cells. Google took a different approach. They didn't just buy power, they bought an entire clean energy developer outright.
Right. Intersect Power.
Yes, they acquired Intersect Power for $4.75 billion in cash. Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai are now, for all intents and purposes, managing utility companies.
But there is a massive irony here, isn't there? These tech giants have spent the last decade publicizing very ambitious, very strict net zero emission goals.
It is the great paradox of the AI boom. For compute, they are turning back to fossil fuels.
Wow.
CleanView's analysis found that roughly 75% of this new 56-gigawatt shadow grid pipeline runs on natural gas.
Why gas and not solar or wind? I mean, they have the money.
Because natural gas is reliable. It provides continuous baseload power, meaning it runs 247 regardless of whether the sun is shining or the wind is blowing.
Makes sense.
And crucially, modular gas generators can be deployed in a matter of months, rather than the years it takes to permit and build a nuclear plant or a massive wind farm. They are solving their immediate speed problem, but they are deeply complicating their long-term environmental commitments.
It's a massive physical pivot. But we can't just look at the U.S. in a vacuum, especially when you consider the geopolitical stakes of AI.
Right.
Let's look at the global stage, specifically the competition with China. You mentioned the U.S. grid is severely constrained, dropping down to that 19% spare capacity. But according to a Goldman Sachs report we reviewed, China is taking a completely different path regarding their grid.
They are. While the West is facing a power crunch, China is actively planning to have 400 gigawatts of spare power capacity by 2030.
400 gigawatts.
Yes, that is 3 times the expected data center power demand of the entire world.
That creates a massive structural advantage, right?
We can call it an inference arbitrage. Usually arbitrage is a finance term for finding a price difference in 2 different markets to make a profit.
Buy low, sell high.
Exactly. But here, the arbitrage is based on the cost of electricity and heavy infrastructure. In China, building a data center costs roughly $6 million per megawatt. In the U.S., due to labor, permitting, and supply chains, it costs around $10 million per megawatt.
That's a huge gap.
When you combine those significantly cheaper construction costs with a 400-gigawatt surplus of cheap, state-subsidized electricity, China developed incredible energy muscle. They have the structural ability to run these wildly energy-intensive AI workloads at a much lower baseline cost than American companies.
Wait, let me stop you there. Doesn't the U.S. have a massive advantage when it comes to the actual silicon? Cheaper power is great, but don't we design much better computer chips?
Historically, yes, and that has been our primary counterbalance. An American data center stocked with top-of-the-line NVIDIA GB200 racks vastly outperforms a Chinese data center relying on their domestic equivalents, like the Huawei Cloud Matrix 384.
Okay, so we're more efficient.
Much more. The Chinese chips currently use nearly 4 times the power to achieve significantly less performance. So even though China's electricity is abundant and cheap, the U.S. has maintained its overall lead because American chips are just so much more efficient.
But policies change. I know there's been a recent shift regarding export bans on some of these advanced chips.
There has, and it is dramatically changing the math. The recent easing of export rules on NVIDIA's H200 chips makes this race uncomfortably close.
How so?
Well, the H200 is a highly capable piece of hardware. By allowing these chips to flow into China, it alleviates their biggest domestic constraint. Suddenly, China can pair their incredibly cheap, abundant electricity and low construction costs with highly efficient imported hardware.
The best of both worlds for them.
Exactly. The cost-to-performance gap between the U.S. and China narrows dramatically.
So the U.S. government obviously sees this vulnerability, this intersection, where our constrained grid meets aggressive geopolitical competition. How are they reacting?
By making their own sweeping play for energy independence. A recent executive order from the Biden administration mandated the rapid development of advanced nuclear energy, specifically designed to support AI and national security.
Nuclear energy.
Yes, the order sets a very aggressive hard deadline. They want an advanced nuclear reactor operating at a domestic military installation by September 30, 2028.
That is just around the corner in infrastructure years.
It really is. It also directs the Department of Energy to designate specific sites for privately funded nuclear reactors to power AI infrastructure.
They're basically trying to use federal authority to cut through the red tape of building nuclear power.
Precisely. The order talks about unlocking HALEU, that's high-assay, low-enriched uranium, which is the specialized fuel these next-generation reactors need. They're effectively creating a fuel bank for these private tech projects. It also streamlines environmental reviews to speed up construction. It is a massive coordinated effort across the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy to establish a secure energy base that isn't reliant on the increasingly fragile public grid.
When you synthesize all of this, the $650 billion spending spree, the shift to natural gas, the nuclear executive orders, the most profound realization is really a physical one.
It is.
We talk about the cloud as if it's this ethereal, invisible thing floating above our heads. It isn't. The cloud is heavy. It is made of steel. It is made of concrete. It requires actual rivers of water for cooling, and it demands massive, continuous baseloads of electricity. The global AI race has fundamentally shifted. It is no longer just a battle of algorithms or software engineers writing clever code.
It is a battle of watts. To win the AI era, tech companies are having to transform themselves into utility giants.
And for you, the listener, it means the physical world and the digital world are colliding in a way we've never seen in our lifetimes. The next time you open a generative AI tool to draft a quick email, or you bite the bullet and pay $5 to have an AI render a video presentation for work, I want you to visualize what's actually happening behind the screen.
You aren't just pinging an invisible server somewhere in the ether.
No. Your prompt is literally drawing physical power from a newly built natural gas turbine in Texas. Or in a few years, maybe a small modular nuclear reactor sitting on a Department of Energy site. Your digital request has an immediate, heavy physical footprint.
And that leads to one final, incredibly provocative thought to ponder. We are currently watching the greatest deployment of capital in the history of the tech industry.
Yep.
We are talking hundreds of billions of dollars being poured into a private 56-gigawatt shadow grid of natural gas and future nuclear plants. But what happens if this massive AI demand doesn't materialize as quickly or as profitably as these tech giants predict?
That's the trillion-dollar question.
What if the efficiency of the software models improves so drastically that they suddenly don't need all this power? If the AI bubble bursts, Who is left holding the bag for all this physical infrastructure, and what does it mean for the future of our physical landscape if it is suddenly dotted with abandoned tech-owned power plants?
It's a massive gamble with the physical world, all to win a digital race. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the physical world behind your digital screens, and we will see you next time.